that's pretty blasted.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Permitting Reform and Transportation Week is brought to you by the Business Roundtable.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to 535. I'm Scott McFarland. In the Cannon Rotunda, we have busy days here, we have very busy days here, and then we have whatever in the world today is going to be. Multiple confirmation hearings and some high-octane, high-profile Trump cabinet members. We also have a uniquely busy day of scrambling to get money, potentially authorization for the U.S. military, the war in Iran, and we have a lot of public debate here about ICE and ICE tactics and ICE regulations. I'm joined by Paul Kane of Notice. Let's start, Paul, with the Senate. We have confirmation hearings, dueling confirmation hearings going on with Jay Clayton to be the Director of National Intelligence and Todd Blanche to be the U.S. Attorney General. This is an imperfect science. Senate questioning at confirmation hearings. We see a very scattered opening to these hearings. What's your experience covering these things?
So your morning note today, you wrote up maybe 20 different areas of questions that you would want the Democrats to ask. You sort of understand that the Republicans are mostly already on his side, and there might only be a couple of them that are really probing questions. Mm-hmm. Those are all really good points. But there's this thing I call senatorial disease, and the longer they're here, the less they want to hear from the witness, and the more they turn it into a speech. You and I were talking just beforehand about Sheldon Whitehouse. When Sheldon Whitehouse first got here in 2007, he was not that far removed from being an actual prosecutor. He had been a U.S. attorney and state attorney general, and he had still a familiarity with the courtroom and how to ask a witness questions to get answers. And his cross-examinations in 2007 and 2008 in some of these hearings were remarkable. He nearly derailed the attorney general nomination of somebody who everybody wanted to support, Mike Mukasey, who was a judge and who George W. Bush was making his final attorney general. Everybody was happy because the previous attorney general, Gonzalez, had been filled with scandals. But Whitehouse broke him down on torture and let him speak and let him talk. And oftentimes that's when they screw up witnesses. And nowadays you look at that Senate Judiciary Committee and too many people are just trying to get their clip of them talking, their points, and that they're going to post on their social media for their Senate campaigns or governor campaigns, and you lose any chance to really have a moment where the witness screws up and everybody goes, whoa, what did he or she just say?
Reveals him or herself.
Yeah.
We saw one exchange as the day began here with the 535, where it was a Republican questioning Todd Blanche, and often it's the friendly fire that can trip up a nominee. And Todd Blanche's response to Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana was that he is not the president's friend, he's the president's lawyer. Then cleaned that up to say, I used to be the president's lawyer. But sometimes those little hiccups can be telling and illustrative of a broader point. And that's why senators often want to let the witness talk, because things can just surface in conversation.
Well, Kennedy is notorious 19 times out of 20 to a witness who is from his party, his party's administration. He's kind to, he does his sort of aw shucks colloquial, I'm just a Southern lawyer type routine. And then the 20th time he stops and is like, I am actually an internationally well-trained lawyer. I went to Vanderbilt, UVA law, and I can't remember which London law school it was. And he just will be like, now what is that you just said there? And all of a sudden the witness knows, oh God, this is the 20th time. Now I'm in trouble. We wish it would be more like 10 out of 20. It would be a better service of oversight. But
I can tell you from my reporting on the 535, there are a variety of different tools staffs will use to prepare their bosses for these types of moments. Some of them will do these murder boards where they actually simulate the questioning. They have somebody stand in for the nominee and go back and forth. Others will just kind of lard up their bosses with notes. with briefings to read through, on the train or in the car. But there are others who believe they're so uniquely skillful that they need no counsel on this. And I think that's where the senatorial disease comes in.
Yeah, and they also have such personal egos that they often will not submit to Philadelphia Eagles reference number 1 today. We grew up watching Andy Reid as the head coach of the Eagles, and he was of that school of offensive genius of like, I am going to script the first 20 plays every game. I want to know this play, that play. And I always talk to staff, and I'm like, did you script, like, the chairman was going to ask this questions, next would be this question. Sometimes they're like, yeah, no. And I was like, well, they just ended up repeating roughly the same questions. And staff are like, yeah, it's the same question, but
we tried.
My boss got to be the one asking it this time. And again, clip, that's going out on their social media. And they haven't elicited new information on this. It can be frustrating.
Let's pivot away from the hearings, although Jay Clayton has his confirmation hearing in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which was paused from an earlier date and is going on now, to what's happening legislatively. What's your read on where we are with defense authorization, which must pass each year, and funding for Iran?
Well, let's start with the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, created in 1960 or 61, I'm not sure now, and has passed every single year since then. It is considered one of 2 holy grails that has to pass, that and the annual appropriations bills that actually fund the agencies.
With a unique thread of bipartisanship often in there.
The Senate always has anywhere from 75 to 90 votes for the NDAA because first of all, there are projects in that bill for every single state and every single country. Whether your thing is the Navy for naval bases near you or whatever, there's something in it for every senator. The Iran war has bollocksed this all up, and both the authorization bill, which is outlines the policy for the Pentagon for the fiscal year, and the appropriations side of it, which is the actual, semicolon here and an exact dollar figure there.
How jammed up do you think the authorization bill is? Because they had the sights set on getting it done before the August recess because they don't want to leave this for the unknown ahead later in the year.
Yeah, I know, but it might have been trending a little bit better in June when the Iran war really was in a ceasefire and there was some sort of MOU that might get to actual peace talks. But the last week or so, we're back to a pretty hot war. Bombs flying every day. Democrats again are saying this is a violation of the War Powers Act. We need to have votes on this. And so any advancement of the NDAA is going to force more votes on that, more discussion of that. And, the House is unveiling a bill today. I think it formally went online this morning that in previous times would have simply been called a supplemental appropriation funding bill to support the war and some domestic emergency stuff. Instead, it is being brought under the party line reconciliation process, fast track. If it gets to the Senate, it only needs 51 votes. It could be Republican votes only. That is in a lot of trouble over here because fiscal hawks don't like burning through $95 billion or so.
How jammed up is the House floor in general? Because that's a complication for it too, right?
Yes, part of what they've had to do, there have been some far-right Republicans that are demanding this thing called the SAVE Act. It is a sort of federal takeover of election law on a bunch of things from voter ID to how ballots, how voter rolls work with regard to immigrants, undocumented immigrants, and sort of Trump trying to chase that that false narrative of that, millions upon millions of undocumented immigrants are actually voting. And those far-right Republicans have basically been blocking everything from coming to the floor until they get assurances that this bill will be put on a must-pass bill. And now they're going to try and put it on this defense Iran war supplemental bill. It can't get through the Senate. We're, 99% certain that it cannot get through the Senate based on the Senate's rules of how it can handle these party line reconciliation votes, unless the Senate turns around and overrules the parliamentarian, which is essentially ending the legislative filibuster. So far, the Republicans don't have anywhere near enough votes to do that. If House Republicans know that the Senate is going to knock out this SAVE Act from their defense spending bill for Iran, I don't know how they're going to be able to vote. They are holding themselves hostage, is the best way to describe it right now. House Republicans, they refuse to do anything until somebody can guarantee them an outcome that they can't get otherwise through standard voting.
With a dwindling number of days in session remaining, that's the dynamic. It's quite a dynamic. Paul Kane just shared with you the experience we all have when we all need to brush up real quick on what we don't know. We usually just ask Paul. Now we all have a chance to ask Paul. There's a lot more coming up on 535. Christian Menefee, Democrat from Houston, is going to join us talking about his attempts to pass legislation to better prevent cyber attacks on U.S. water systems. Nationwide, blue states, red states, big communities, small communities. I'll also talk with Dina Titus of Nevada about her efforts on better controlling or regulating prediction markets and about the war in Iran. As Paul just described, there are some big issues about Iran pressing in the U.S. House as we speak. It's a real busy day here. I'm glad you spent some time with us on 535. Stand by.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
$1.5 trillion is parked on the sidelines. Projects that would help create good-paying American jobs are stuck in years of burdensome reviews. Permitting reform would unlock over 650 major U.S. infrastructure projects, from new roads and bridges to bringing more energy online. With faster, more efficient permitting, we can unleash America's economic potential. Let's move from waiting to building. Ready, set, let's build.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
Congresswoman, we only have a couple minutes,
Okay.
which is perfect for our 535 1 minute.
Should I be afraid?
Who's the smartest member of Congress?
So I'm really putting you on the spot here.
Don't tell anybody this.
I'm too much of a politician to answer that question.
This is crazy.
What's the best committee?
I do like them all.
On you, baby.
That was good. That was good.
I'm Brody Mullins. Welcome back to 535 here with Mark Kita. Mark, thanks for joining us. From Narrative Strategies, we're unveiling today, rolling out today, our brand new partnership, Narrative Strategies / 535 opinion poll. So we're going to start with a major topic for this week, which is permitting reform. Yeah. Tell us what you found in your poll. In our poll, I should say.
Our poll, first of many.
Yeah, right.
Permitting reform is, look, your regular voter, so that, just a reminder, our poll is a nationwide survey of registered voters, fielded a couple weeks ago. We covered a number of topics, but permitting reform it's not something that rolls off the tip of the tongue for your typical voter, but they know about building, and they know about building big things. And the top line finding from this poll is the belief that America needs to pick up the pace. You got 40% of Americans who say it just takes too long to build important and critical infrastructure projects. And it's not just like a theoretical question for them. When we ask, you got about 3/4 of the public who say it's actually a problem if there's important infrastructure projects that they're not getting built on time and on budget. And they're seeing it. We asked a question in our poll around like, where are you seeing this? Roads, bridges, and highways, housing, energy grid, water systems. All of those issues between 40 and 50% of the public is saying like, I'm aware in my community of major delays in these areas and I'd like government to step up and pick up the pace.
At the same time though, it seemed like one of the things you found in the poll was that a lot of people are aware of AI and issues related to AI, but not that many people were talking about it and hearing about permitting reform.
The permitting reform, if you ask specifically about the question of like, are you hearing about permitting reform as an issue, that is not breaking through as a top line issue. It doesn't mean the issue is not important, because when you think, what is permitting reform about? It's about getting projects online that we're not just studying projects, infrastructure projects, but they're actually developing them. The idea that, what was fascinating about the poll is that when we ask specifically, and a lot of polling questions we have, you have to ask people, like, give them a little bit of information. So on permitting reform we asked, we said, do you support updating permitting rules so that we can approve and review projects faster and develop those more efficiently, even if it means potentially streamlining environmental regulations or streamlining community input. And on that question, you had 75% of the public saying, yeah, I think that's good. And they recognize, look, public policy is all about trade-offs. If you just ask, do you want to speed up and streamline and cut red tape for projects? Every American will say, yeah, I do that. We want to speed things up. The important question is introducing a trade-off. And the core trade-off with permitting reform is the environmental review piece and the community input piece. And what we see across the data here is that, one, there's a bias towards let's build a little bit faster. We're not talking about going from 20 to 100, running roughshod over environmental reviews and community input, but going from like 40 to 60 or 70, and that means, look, can we streamline the permitting process a little bit? I understand that it takes an average of 2 years to go through an environmental review. Sometimes it can take up to 7 years. By that point, maybe the communities are already come and gone. You got a whole new set of residents to deal with, right? Can we pick up the pace on some of those things? And that's what, clearly it's about incremental increase in kind of velocity of permitting. It's not about kind of throwing out all the guardrails. The public is very clear they still want guardrails. So.
And what are you hearing from voters and respondents about data centers?
Data centers is a fascinating topic. So, data centers are in the spotlight right now, a lot of headlines. In the poll, we asked, where are you seeing delays and is that a problem? So about a third of the public said that they're aware of delays in kind of data center development, and that 53% of the public says it's a problem if there are major delays. So there's clearly a contingent of people out there who want to speed up even some data center development. There's a lot of context here, right? But the question on data centers, I think there's kind of two stories here. There's the data centers that power digital infrastructure and everything we know from like Zoom to telehealth to Spotify to streaming and Netflix and all that. Some people recognize data centers as fueling kind of the digital economy, if you will. They're warmer to data centers. I think what's changed the dynamic clearly is there's more development around AI. And the connection of AI, I know we'll talk about AI a little bit later, but there's very clearly a question around Judgment Day scenario, right? How powerful is AI? The public recognizes it's one of the most consequential technologies of our time. And they have real questions around not just AI, but if data centers are fueling the AI boom, they have real questions of like, how is that development going to proceed? We can talk more about if you want, we can talk more about data centers, like what's the path on data centers, but we've studied, there's a lot more data in there around whether it's a data center or whether it's a manufacturing facility, whether it's a new Walmart or another kind of big box store. Communities have real questions of what's in it for us. What's the deal?
Yeah.
They're not anti-data center as much as they are more pro, I want to hear the deal for my community. And in the case of data centers, there are real questions the communities ask around water, around rates, around noise, around the broader environment, around jobs. And what we're seeing as and the story is just being written on data centers right now, but what we're seeing is that the more durable, the more specific the commitments and the principles are for guiding that development in a community, the more communities are open to that conversation. So
let's talk about AI, but let's also get to the working class segment of this poll, because I found that the most fascinating. So, for our entire lifetime, for the last 100 years since FDR, the Democrats have controlled the working class, or the working class really made up the Democratic Party. What is the poll showing you about those numbers?
It is currently the politics is scrambled. Nobody owns the mantle of working class. And that means a lot of opportunity for any side of this debate. We asked a question a simple question. We tested 6 brands, 6 brands/labels. The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, Progressives, Democratic Socialists of America, America First, and MAGA. And we just asked us a simple question. How well does this label or brand represent the interests of working class Americans? A couple fascinating things we learned. Number one, the gap between the winner and the top and the bottom association was 12 points. So all of these brands are within 12 points of each other in terms of representing the working class. The other thing is nobody breaks 55%. So there's nobody none of these labels is like owning that mantle. That's the first thing. The second thing around working class is that, or I think the second fascinating thing about this data is how much crossover appeal there is with the movement labels, and this gets to economic populism and what we're seeing in our broader politics. America First. Would you believe that a third of Democrats say America First represents the interests of working class Americans? Would you also find it interesting, which I do, that a third of Republicans say progressives represent the interests of working class Americans? We continue to see in the data that the party labels are polarizing. You have 10 to 15% of Democrats saying Republicans represent the interests of working class, and you have the same number of Republicans saying Democrats, which is to say very few of them. So the party labels are still polarizing. What is showing more fluidity and movement is what I'd call the movement labels. America First in particular ranks highly. And just so our listeners have some of the specifics on the numbers. Overall, Democratic Party 55%. A lot. Voters say 55% of voters say the Democratic Party cares a lot or some about working class Americans. America First 54, Republicans 50, Progressives 46, Democratic Socialists 44, and MAGA 43. Among Democrats, I think the parties can take some solace, a little bit of comfort, if you will, in that among Democrats, self-identified Democrats and independent leaders, they put Democratic Party number 1. Followed by Democratic Socialists and Progressives. Pretty clear margin between the two. Among Republicans, Republican partisans, they will list the Republican Party number 1 in terms of representing working class Americans, followed by America First and MAGA. I think there's 2 implications here. One is the working class mantle is up for grabs, and I know both sides. You mentioned FDR, and there's a lot of conversation of like how that's going to play out in this election. And the other is like this America First. I think there's a real question. We didn't dig into it in this study around like geopolitics, our engagement with NATO and the rest of the world. And when you see, a third of Democrats behind like America First banner and a third of Republicans behind a progressive banner, I think that's telling you, this horseshoe effect we talk about in politics, strange bedfellows. I think this is some of the evidence that you're seeing of like why do you see some of the strange bedfellows in this horseshoe in our politics today.
So it's fascinating. So we've got about a minute left. You also say you think that the Democratic Party still might have an advantage with the working class. Is that what you believe?
It's.
Or what are the Democratic advantages, I guess?
The Democratic advantage just in this data is that they've got. It's marginal.
Okay.
It's marginal.
So it's really up for grabs.
It's up for grabs. I wouldn't take comfort in seeing a 12-point gap and only having 55% of the public saying my party represents the interests of working class. I think both sides are looking to get that number much higher. And, we've talked before about the importance of the affordability narrative and how much that important that back to permitting reform. Like there's an affordability narrative in permitting reform, for example. Healthcare, there's an affordability piece. To the extent that the parties can develop and deliver a more credible argument on kind of affordability, I think that's goes a long way on the working class piece.
Mark Kita of Narrative Strategies, thanks for joining us on our inaugural Narrative Strategies 535 poll. We'll be back with some more soon. I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be back soon. On 535.
You're watching 535. We'll be right back.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there, and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we going to do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family, because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
Welcome back. This is 535, and I'm Susan Davis. July marks a key inflection point for the USMCA trade deal. My next guest is Arizona Republican Congressman Juan Ciscomani. He's a member of the U.S.-Mexico caucus, and he's been examining this deal. Congressman, welcome to 535.
Thank you for having me.
There are several options on the table for what comes next. Can you talk about what the options on the table are for this trade pact?
Sure. So let's go back into history real quick here of NAFTA, right? As this trade deal initiates with Canada, U.S., and Mexico, a historic trade agreement. And then came USMCA 25 years later, when the world was a different place. Technology had advanced, rules of origin were different, manufacturing had grown, and specifically in Mexico. So different challenges arose at that time. President Trump took on that challenge in his first term and renegotiated NAFTA and made it the USMCA, the United States, Mexico-Canada agreement, right? So little did we know that in that 5-year sunset, he was going to be back in office to renegotiate his own agreement at that time. So trade has always been one of the top priorities of the president. He understands the trade deficits that we have with some nations, but also the value that we have in trade relationships with other countries, specifically in this case, Mexico and Canada. Now, the trilateral agreement has been the goal for a while, but right now what we're looking at is more feasible, I would say, is going to be an agreement with each individual country and then potentially bringing it together for another trilateral agreement. That's where I foresee this going. Now, I may not be accurate on all the details on this. I'm not the lead negotiator on it, but we did meet with the United States trade representative, the ambassador, this week actually, and we asked about this, about what the future holds on it, and he sees the value of the relationship with both countries. The conversations are at different levels with Canada as they are with Mexico. For Arizona, Mexico is our #1 trading partner. times 4. In terms of who the number 2 is, which is Canada. But Mexico is 4 times the amount of trade that we do with Canada. So for us, it's very important. Manufacturing, produce. In my background before this job, I was the head of the Arizona-Mexico Commission that dealt a lot with this issue. So we've been at the forefront of this. One more thing that I'll mention is that one of my predecessors, Congressman Jim Colby, was here from the 80s all the way to the early 2000s. He was one of the lead people on NAFTA as well. So my district has been at the forefront of this trade conversation for a while.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that explicitly, is that your district is unique in that you have a very direct relationship with Mexico. Can you just talk geographically exactly where your district in Arizona is?
So we're Arizona, Tucson, which is in the southeast corner of the state. So my district goes in that southeast corner, borders New Mexico, but also Mexico. So I have a chunk of the border. So my issue is that when I came in was anything border, right? And it was always important for me to differentiate. Are we talking border security? Are we talking border immigration? Or are we talking border trade?
Yeah.
And these things are separate in a lot of ways. So the conversation today is around trade, and we want that flow. We want that the agreements to flow in a way that is fair and beneficial and profitable for both sides, and that's what we're striving for here.
So the options, it also seems that you could do a straight extension, which would go on for about another 14 or so years, renegotiate it in some way, or let it expire, and it would expire in 2034-ish, I believe. How, it sounds like you're talking about that there might be some renegotiation of the terms of this. Is it around the margins, or do you think there really needs to be substantive changes to the existing trade pact?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. When you look at the 3 options that you mentioned, if we just extend this, which I don't think that would happen, to be honest. I don't think this administration would go with that. They're not in the business of just letting things go and not actually having impact on them, especially with President Trump's 2.5 years left in office. He's going to want to make the largest impact that he can with his knowledge and his vision of trade. So I think that would be the case. Letting it expire would not be ideal for a lot of reasons, obviously. One thing that I hear from businesses often, especially at the border, is what they need is just predictability, right? What are we dealing with here? What is the landscape going to look like? And then they can adapt to that. So the notion of this possibly expiring is not good for business. It's not good for the trade relationship either. So when you look at the options that we have to change this, it's going to come down to the negotiations. Now, one thing that I asked the trade representative, the ambassador, this week, I said, how is Mexico responding to this? And they said very favorably, better than ever before, actually. And sometimes the politics get in the way. High-level officials can say some things and kind of portray strength for their country, which is great. And then in the negotiating rooms, they know where we stand and what we need to get to. Mexico understands that in some ways the United States has been at a disadvantage in the trade relationship and that we have a deficit there. They understand the president's priority to get rid of that deficit and bring it to close to zero as possible and actually make it profitable for us as well. So they understand what they need to do to get there. It's all a matter of negotiations, but I think it's going well. But let me tell you, I think also the White House is not going to wait forever to get there, and they will push their leverage points if they need to. But as far as I know, as of this week, negotiations are going well with Mexico specifically. Canada's in a whole different lane.
Yeah. Is there anything you specifically would like to see change, particularly as it relates to your district or your state?
Well, there are different rules around what American companies have to pay to be able to operate in Mexico, for example, versus what Mexican companies can operate business in the United States. That's one of the main drivers of the deficit that we're seeing here. Some rules around the fines that American companies have to pay, or the taxes that they end up paying to operating in Mexico. When you look at the trade relationship that we have, we export Arizona slightly more than we import for Mexico. So we're still in that sense on an advantage. Overall with the United States, and remember, Mexico is the #1 trading partner for Texas, for California, for Arizona, several states that's the case, but they don't all have the same exact export-import relationship. At the end of the day, business is business. We want to make sure that we do that, but I want to see a smoother way and safety and security for American investors to be able to invest in Mexico as well, without the risk of what it can be perceived as a government leaning heavier and heavier on the left that endangers the possibility of doing business in Mexico for our American companies.
I want to ask you about something Donald Trump said recently when he told reporters, quote, "We don't need anything that Canada has, we don't need anything that Mexico has, but they need everything that we have." I realize that's a very simplistic statement, but you get the general sentiment of what he's saying there is it seems to suggest that the U.S. has all the power in this negotiated agreement. Is that your assessment as well?
Well, definitely when you look at the size of our economy and you look at the size of the economy of any nation that we're doing an agreement with, we are the A side of those agreements. We are the heavy side. We have the leverage. We have the consumer base. We have the GDP. The United States, we're in the driver's seat for sure. And I think the president wants to maximize that. And many times, if you look at the different agreements, the United States has been treated as if we are the B side of the equation. And we end up agreeing to things that are not totally beneficial for us. We benefit some, but the other side gets a much better deal than we do. So I think what the president is trying to do is just to say, hey, let's level the playing field. There's a way that we can all win. It's not a zero-sum game. Us winning doesn't mean that they lose, but it also can be that them winning means that we lose either. So it's all about an agreement that both sides can benefit from this. They have things that we can benefit from, and we have things they benefit from. And in this case with Canada and Mexico specifically, such a different relationship than with other countries that we can trade with because we're neighbors. Mm-hmm. So Paul Fannin, one of the former governors in Arizona that founded the Arizona-Mexico Commission, said this. He said, if God made us neighbors, let us be good neighbors, right? So if we're going to be neighboring countries and we have mutual interest, that we have to have it on security, for example, which is one of the leverage points the president really used at the beginning. They have to play this in this arena of security as well. Then let us be good neighbors and let us trade, let us do business. We have a lot of biculturalism going through the border as well, so it is trade, but it is also partnering on security fronts also, and making sure that we understand that we're sovereign nations. We need to respect the laws and respect the border and the crossing, but also we want to do business together. And we have a lot of families that have members on both sides, and it's a very regional area that unless you live there, you don't understand the common flow that goes on, that someone can, go to lunch on the other side of the border, go back home, go to the doctor's office on one side or the other. It's a very fluid situation there, but we need those rules and the law to be obeyed as well.
What is the biggest import we get from Mexico? I would think agriculture is probably
agriculture. Yes,
they provide a lot of our food.
Tomatoes is a big one specifically on that. In Arizona now that we have cold room facilities, we started that maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. We're able to import berries as well. So this is what it is. And then on the Yuma side, though, we are Arizona exporting to the rest of the nation lettuce and produce as well. So Arizona is a big factor for the country in terms of the produce, either importing it or producing it as well.
How has the president's tariffs affected this conversation? Because obviously they have not been very popular abroad, even if they may be popular domestically, politically. Are they a factor in these trade talks?
Well, let me say this. When I was with the governor's office when the president was in his first term, and when the threat was real about the tariffs, there was a lot of alarms that went off with our border communities. Then things panned out differently. USMCA was renegotiated, and that was avoided. This second time around, actually the tariffs go into place. And I saw a very different reaction from our border communities, in terms of the business leaders. They knew it was coming. I think they realized that was going to be the case. Not that everybody wanted that or they loved it, but everybody understands why that was. They understand what the trade relationship looked like. And business learned how to do business within the rules that were in front of him at that moment. So even the president has said it. He doesn't blame business leaders for taking advantage of the rules of the game and making sure that they use them for their advantage. So all these people on both sides were able to use that for their advantage for the time being. But they knew that something was coming because they knew that it was imbalanced. The trade relationship wasn't where it needed to be. So what the main thing they're asking for right now is, tell me what the rules of the game are going to be long term, because I can do business in whatever rules are. They have preference of that and they voice that. But if you tell me what is their number one concern or the number one request is to have predictability, long-term planning, how are things going to look like? These small extensions that we were looking at, 90 days and so on, those are very problematic for business.
Is the end result or goal of renegotiating any element of this trade deal that there will be clarity on this tariff picture between both Canada and Mexico? Because I know in particular with Canada, it has, inflamed some tensions between the two countries.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the White House, the president uses tariffs as a leverage point. He's a fan of them. He said it himself, and it's a good way for them to make a point and be able to negotiate that. I historically haven't been a big proponent of them. I think free trade has benefited, but there's also been a lot of gaps and a lot of shortcomings in that as well that need to be perfected. And the president is in every right to use that and be able to get us to a place where agreements can be renegotiated in a way that also benefits American companies and American consumers, as it will for our Mexican counterparts as well. So there's a way to do a win-win here, and I have confidence in the president that he's gonna get it done.
I also want to ask you about something that you've been working on that's about the port of entry or point of entry, what do you say? Port of entry in Nogales, Arizona. And you want to put a huge investment into improving this. What is it you're trying to do here, and why do you think it matters?
So in Nogales, Arizona, we have a dual port of entry. Mariposa, which is the commercial port, and I say this because it's kind of like in the higher ground, and then you have the Decancini port of entry, that is the pedestrian and also commercial vehicle point. So that hasn't been updated in possibly 30 years or so. So there's an investment necessary that is outdated. It needs to be updated for security reasons, but also for trade reasons. The vast majority of the trade that happens in Arizona goes through that port of entry. So what I'm advocating for, and I led a bipartisan letter on this to the administration, to Secretary Mark Mullen, is to prioritize that port of entry for updating and upgrading as well to 20 lanes. And we've got a very specific laywork there based on the feedback that I'm getting from boots on the ground on what can and should be done. And it's actually time to get that done. So the letters to GSA, to the Secretary as well. We got a response back from Undersecretary Scott saying, we agree with you on the urgency here. The dollar amount is still kind of being figured out, but it's going to be probably in the $1.5 to $2 billion investment. I'm the only Arizona in the Appropriations Committee, House, Senate, Democrat, Republican. So I'm a big advocate for this. So I'll be working on this in next year's appropriations budget.
Is that the vehicle essentially is appropriations, not the highway bill or some other infrastructure?
It's a combination. So it's a combination. We have report language in the appropriations bill that asks and requests GSA to look at the cost effectiveness of this. So right now we're in the process of an environmental study. We always got to go through that. So no allocated funds need to be needed for that. But as soon as the environmental study is complete, then we'll have a dollar amount, then the appropriations process kicks in. So having me on that seat in the Appropriations Committee is going to be key to be able to get this through.
Congressman, I really appreciate your time. If you'll humor me, we like to do a short segment at the end of these interviews called 1 minute. I don't know if this is a sneak attack on you or not, but these will be a bit of a lightning round of questions.
I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business.
I ask unanimous consent. I ask unanimous consent.
The senator from Nebraska is recognized.
The gentlelady is recognized.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
First question, what are you going to do for August recess?
Parades. For August, I'm sorry.
Yeah, August.
4th of July. For August, we're going to be around the district. I mean, this is the time when we get all around the district. We go visit the sites that we were able to appropriate resources to, and kids go back to school. So I'll be walking kids, 6 of them, to a first day of school. Although the high school ones may not be so happy that I walk them in, but I always do. And I do a selfie, and I kind of embarrass them a little bit.
Very loudly. Dad loves you.
They know it. I love you, love you. Well, let me walk you to your locker. They're like, no, Dad, please. But it's a dad's job to embarrass their kids.
One of my favorite questions to ask members of Congress is if someone was going to your district for the first time and they asked you where to go eat.
Yes.
Where's one of the first places you send them?
Oh, you can't go wrong by visiting Mexican food places in Tucson. We're known for that. We have a lot of them all over town, actually, like traditional south side of Tucson, kind of like mom and pop shops, and then some that are, a little fancier, I would say, but they're on the northern side, and then they have great food as well. I like to mix it up everywhere.
What's your order?
My order?
Yeah.
Carne asada. That is my go-to where I go.
Can't do it wrong.
Can't go wrong with that.
Who do you think is one of your favorite people on the other side of the aisle?
On the other side, I'll go back in history lane here for a little bit. Ross Mofford, she was the first governor in Arizona, a female governor in Arizona. By the time actually she became governor, there was a statute that she couldn't No female could, no woman could hold a statewide office in Arizona. She challenged that, was a trailblazer, and I think she set the tone for a lot of people, not just women, but I think minorities and a lot of other people that came after her that said, you know what, we can do this too. So I would say Ross Mofford.
Final question, if you have to do karaoke, what's your song?
Anything with Rocky theme, because those are my favorite songs. I just jam at them. Doesn't mean that I work out a lot. It just means that I listen to the songs and get pumped up before work. You need that in this job.
Listening to the soundtrack is half the battle at working
You know
out.
what? I'm halfway there.
If you got a playlist, you'll be fine. Congressman Juan Ciscomani, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for your
so
time.
much. Appreciate it.
We need to take a very quick break, and we will be right back.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
Congressman Molina, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Appreciate you having me.
Can you explain to people where your district is and what kind of district it is? What do they grow in your district? And is that a big job industry in your district? Talk to me about this bill you have. It's called the Farms Act. What exactly is the problem you're trying to solve with it? Is this something that the administration could address on their own, or does it need to require Congress to pass a law to really fix it? Is this bipartisan at all? Do you have Democratic support? So what's the brass tacks here? Who's your counterpart in the Senate, and what is the path forward you see for this legislation?
Oh my gosh. You know, let me think about that.
I'm Brody Mullins. Welcome back to 535. Today we're here with Brian Barry, Executive Director of the Ticket Policy Forum. Thanks for joining us.
I'm happy to be here, Brody. Thank you.
Tell us about the Ticket Policy Forum, roughly 1 year old.
Yeah, we're roughly 1 year old. We're a 501c6 advocacy coalition and association of ticket selling marketplaces. So our members are companies that you've likely heard of: StubHub, SeatGeek, Vivid Seats, Game Time, TickPick, and Events Ticket Center. So we offer fans about 100 million tickets a year sold across our platforms, and have been around since the year 2000 when StubHub first launched.
So how are you different from Live Nation Ticketmaster?
In every possible good way. Look, we're the competitors at the end of the day. One of our members, SeatGeek, competes head-to-head with Live Nation Ticketmaster, with Ticketmaster actually. Live Nation is more on the content side, artist management, venue management, tours and production.
You're just on the ticket side.
On the ticketing side. So when it's focused down to the ticketing of a building, like a stadium, that may be a SeatGeek, it may be a Ticketmaster, or also on the resale side too, which a lot of people don't realize that Ticketmaster is the second largest reseller of tickets for events in the U.S. as well. So we offer just another option for venues when they are selling their tickets, and we also offer fans another option when it comes to buying tickets too.
And again, dive in a little bit more to how Ticketmaster is different. Why are they a problem?
Yeah. So Ticketmaster is part of a big family, if you will, right? And in April, there was a successful verdict that came out of the Southern District of New York, finding that, in fact, it is operating as an illegal monopoly. That took a long time to get there. I've been hemming and hawing about this for years. But Ticketmaster controls roughly 80% of tickets for major concert tours. You know, it'll fluctuate a little bit in terms of the percentage and the market share they have across sports or different leagues, but they are the dominant ticketer. So when you can access tickets, how much you're going to pay for tickets, all of this is controlled by one company.
So is it a free market in that just Ticketmaster they were one of the first companies out there, they have 80% because they're a better business, or is it that they're illegally using anti-competitive tactics?
Yeah, so I think it's been decades of growth, in fairness, and Ticketmaster and Live Nation merged in 2010. that was approved under the Obama Justice Department. It's at the very early stages of being unwound, hopefully, at this point in time. I think part of it had to do with the fact that they were buying up down the vertical chain of the live events system. They were buying up so many different parts. Eventually you control all the parts. So that's how we arrived there. They bought their way there, they bullied their way there, and they've dominated their way there. But hopefully, in the next year or two, that will all change.
So things change on the antitrust side, starting in the Biden administration. Jonathan Cantor, the head of the DOJ antitrust division back then, filed a lawsuit against them. He happens to be a big music guy.
Me too.
And so he filed a lawsuit. The Trump administration came along, and at first it looked like the administration was going to continue that lawsuit or pursue it vigorously. Trump came out with a executive order that asked his antitrust enforcers at the FTC and the DOJ to crack down on this industry. And then what happened?
So, after the executive order, not a lot. The DOJ and the FTC did a report. That never went public, so we don't know what it says. We do know on day 3 of the trial, the DOJ reached a settlement. They thought it had teeth. I'm pleased, our industry is pleased that 33 states and the District of Columbia decided to keep on to seek a structural breakup of the company. This is unprecedented, but with this number of state attorneys general together, we think they can pull it off. Why the DOJ settled, they have a calculus that they run through. So you'd have to ask the DOJ. But I think ultimately what happened with the verdict proves that the DOJ should have stayed the course.
Let's slow down on that part because you said it was unprecedented. It really was a crazy. It could be a movie almost.
I think it should be.
It seemed like the Trump administration overall was going to have this very vigorous antitrust enforcement across the board. On tech companies and on Ticketmaster, the executive order that you mentioned. Yeah. Then this trial is coming up. They go to trial, so you think that this is going to happen, and then 3 days in, the DOJ pulls the rug on its own prosecutors. Right?
Yes,
some of the prosecutors didn't even know they were cutting a deal.
That's right.
They cut a deal for like a $170 million fine or some tiny slap on the
roughly
wrist.
About 1 week of revenue.
Right. And the DOJ is asked about this. I think there's never really a great answer on what changed. The Wall Street Journal had some reporting on this. But then the other crazy part is that once DOJ leaves, these states step in. So tell us about the states.
Yeah, so 33 states and the District of Columbia, they said, no thank you, DOJ. We're not interested in settling. And I'm happy they did. I mean, it was only weeks later that the verdict was handed down. But I think, during that process is when we got to see what were the bullying tactics used by that company? How, what did dominance and control look like? And we've come to realize that venues didn't have a say on who got to take the stage. Artists didn't necessarily get to have much of a say about what fans were ultimately charged or what happens when they go on tour and what they have to pay. And ultimately, we know this from our own experience, that when it comes to ticketing, there was no ability to really break in. Live Nation for years has been able to tell venues, if you want our touring artists, you have to also use our Ticketmaster ticketing service. And if you don't, you're not going to get our content. We heard a lot of rumors about this, but it had never been put on display the way it was during the trial.
So another remarkable part about this is the states win. Apparently the states, in my reporting, shows that the states were ready for DOJ to drop out. So they were had been preparing a case in case DOJ dropped out.
They had to pick up and move rather quickly.
Right, I think part of the calculus was DOJ drops the case, the states aren't ready to roll, and then everything falls apart. Instead, the states were ready, which is sort of remarkable. Then they win. It was
remarkable.
And then DOJ puts out, remember, they put out a statement praising the decision.
They did. They did. And still, there's still the step ahead where the judge has to, take a look at that settlement agreement and approve it. Fortunately, you have to look at this as two different tracks. There is the federal side of it, which is the slap on the wrist side, and then there's the remedies phase that will come out, and that's going to be where the real outcomes are delivered.
I guess that was my next question. I was confused by that. So once the judge rules with the states and against Live Nation Ticketmaster, I thought did the settlement just go away, or the settlement is still in place? So that settlement will still be reviewed.
That settlement still gets
even
reviewed.
Though the states is sort of.
And we anticipate there'll be post-trial motions by Live Nation. They're talking about it. You do have a situation here with a company that arguably has a blank check and can hire as many attorneys as it needs. But if you take a look at the summary of remedies that are being sought by the states, We should all get in those grandstands and start rooting on the states and cheering for them, because they are looking for a true divorce of two companies that should have never been married. You know, that will help. They're requiring certain divestments of Live Nation as well when it comes to venues, certain market requirements in terms of how the company will be able to do business with artists and with venues, and what they can do, and importantly what they cannot do to foreclose their competitors in the ticketing space as well. But, you know, there's still a process that has to play out. We're seeing some legislative bodies in the meantime scratch their head and think maybe we should get into this first. That's a legitimate question, but we have to, you know, take a pause. I've told many state lawmakers, let's not try to necessarily reform or restructure the market as you know it today. I think we can all agree there's some things, when you have a great experience, you think the market's working just fine. There's a lot of fans that are upset. There are a lot of, I'll tell you, in our industry, there's a lot of frustration with being able to break in and offer these venues a better ticketing partner, but they too are afraid to do so. You know, so, you know, let's pause, let's take a step back. My advice is let's see what happens. What does the new market look like in a post-Live Nation Ticketmaster breakup that then we can then refine? Otherwise, we're kind of moving around the deck chairs on the Titanic, and it's premature to do that. So, you know, but you know, the outcome of what happens in the courts, as well as what happens in state houses, as well as what happens here in Congress, you know, it's a big question mark, but it's all within pretty close reach.
So this show's supposed to be about Congress. We've talked about the antitrust division for 8 minutes. Tell us about Congress. You've got the BOTS Act and another piece of legislation on this topic. Okay, tell us about this.
Real creative name, I know. So yeah, there's a bipartisan bill that's moving through Congress. As you know, Brody, not much that goes with what, 409 to 15, I think, out of the House. Overwhelmingly bipartisan. Went to the Senate. About a year or so ago, we thought it was going to head to the president's desk for signature. A year and a half ago, you might remember there was a famous social media post that went out about anyone who votes for this, you know, ought to go down in the primaries, and that was enough to gridlock Washington for several months. The Ticket Act was in there. You know, so it was so close to, you know, and that was not a controversial part of that reconciliation package. But it does really good things to the market. We are for it, and it's, you know, it's like anything else in DC. It took years to sit around tables with industry to talk about what should be in the Ticket Act, what can we live with, you know, what will be positive both to protect competition in the market as well as providing new protections to consumers. And we think it's a good law, and it ought to become, it's a good piece of legislation, and it ought to become the law. So it will guarantee refunds for canceled and postponed events. It will require that guarantee policies are clearly and conspicuously disclosed before you purchase tickets, so you should know what your protections are. It will ban the what's known as deceptive speculative ticketing, where you don't know, but the person offering to sell you a ticket actually doesn't have that ticket or has no expectation that they will. They're hoping they are, and hope is not a good enough strategy when you or I are out there buying tickets. You ought to know that that's the nature of that transaction before you go into it. You have a right to know. So it'll ban deceptive speculative practice as well. All in pricing. Sounds like a no-brainer, but that will codify it into law because last May, the FTC finalized a rule requiring total upfront pricing of tickets. Again, sounds simple, but I will tell you as a fan myself, there were many times where I thought I had a $70 ticket in the cart, and then I'm texting my friend saying, actually, it's 100 or it's 115, you need to Venmo me a little bit more, or whatever it might be. So just so you see, the first price is the last price. We've seen it in airlines, and we know it could work here. There was a situation years ago where one of our marketplace members actually did this on their own. They thought if we lead by example, others will follow. That didn't happen. So then we turned to Congress and said this ought to be a federal law, because what we're seeing otherwise is a risk that depending on what state you live in, you might have certain protections afforded to you, but you don't have them in another, and it shouldn't be that way. So we ought to pass this at the federal level. And it's a no-brainer, really, to have upfront all-in pricing, to ban speculative tickets, to ban deceptive websites that pretend to be something they're not, pretending to be a sports team. If they're not the sports team, for example, pretending to be a music venue. If they're not the music venue, for example, you should know exactly where you're buying your tickets from and what tickets you are buying. It's pretty simple, very straightforward, very popular. So we hope we can get it across the finish line.
Brian Barry, Executive Director of the Ticket Policy Forum. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be right back on 535.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family, because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
It moved, you did. Back on 535, I'm Scott McFarland, joined now by Congresswoman Dina Titus, who represents the southeast corner of Las Vegas, Henderson, Nevada, beautiful part of America.
Oh.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
On the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and also pushing a piece of legislation I want to talk to you about at length. The Fair Marketing and Sports Integrity Act talks about how we should or should not have prediction markets, these uniquely popular emerging prediction markets involved with sports, with, I suppose you'd characterize it as wagering.
That's
Tell
right.
us what the bill would do.
Well, I represent the Las Vegas Strip, and that's our bread and butter, gaming and hospitality. So this dips into what we do call sports betting. And since the court made this possible for states to do this, you've had about 2/3 of the states implement sports betting and a number of the tribes. So this is kind of a big part of income, employment, tax revenue, and when you start calling derivatives or exchanges or contracts sports betting, then you can see how it would make a difference. Now they want to regulate it like hog bellies, and it's just not the same thing. So we are looking very closely at how it's regulated, who has options to use it, what you can bet on, and if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, then it's sports betting.
Before we talk about the how on this legislation, let's talk about what this thing is.
Okay.
Poly market, the prediction markets that are emerging, are giving people a chance to make what you would characterize as a bet on a sporting event or the probability of some sports event occurring. Explain how all that's happening now, what you're trying to deter.
Well, you can go online and find Kalshi or find some of the others that are the big ones and place a bet. Now, they say it's not betting because you're not betting against the house, you're betting against other people. You can bet anything from when a war is going to end to who wins an election to when the bird flies off the wire. Or you can bet on teams, and you've seen so much of that revenue come in on the World Cup as people have bet. So you're betting the odds, you're betting against each other, but it certainly pays out big dividends. Now the problem is there are no regulations whatsoever. If you place a bet and then you challenge it and they say, no, sorry, you don't get paid, there's not a Nevada Gaming Commission that you can go to and get some kind of relief. Now you saw that during the Super Bowl. There was an incident where somebody was predicted to be in the halftime show. Well, that person appeared on the stage, but they didn't sing. So the people who made the bet thought, well, they should get paid. The people who took the bet said, no, she didn't sing, she didn't entertain, so you don't get paid. There's no regulation, no concern about age, problem betting, no contribution to the local economy. So it's really just a kind of an encapsulated exchange of money as opposed to contributing to a community like regular gaming does.
Let's talk about what the dissenting voices are saying here. That they'd prefer to do this type of wagering where you don't have the house taking a rake, taking parts of the money, where you can be, I suppose, more decentralized with how you're making your wagers. There seems to be a market for this. People seem to want this. The risks you mentioned aside.
Oh, they do. It's very popular, especially popular among young men who use their phone a lot for games and other things. It's real easy and convenient, and so that's where the market is. They advertise it on college campuses, at halftime of other sporting events, so there is real appeal. The appeal is the odds are better and it's more convenient. But the odds are better because they don't have to meet any of the regulations. I'm not saying they can't do sports betting. I'm just saying if they do it, they need to follow the rules of either the tribe or the state that have already been put in place wherever they're offering these bets.
Elsewhere on the Hill here today among the 535, Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Democrat from New Jersey, Congressman Jeff Van Drew, Republican from New Jersey, are also talking about this issue of sports betting and how it could encroach on the local business. Do you hear pushback, Congresswoman Titus, that this is parochial for you because you represent the Strip, that you may be having parochial interests, which is your job, but makes it more difficult for you to convince others?
Well, there is a gaming caucus, it's a bipartisan caucus. We've got bipartisan members who are signing on to our bill and who, as you mentioned, are supportive of doing some kind of reining in of Kalshi. But remember, gaming exists in all states but two, Hawaii and Utah. So it used to be parochial. Right. You used to go to Las Vegas. Now you can go just about anywhere. And it exists on tribal lands too, so they're very concerned about it. So I think it's gone beyond that. And there's concern too among some people, not just about the sports betting angle, but about how Kalshi can take bets on things that are so prone to ethical challenges, just like trading stocks. You can determine the result of a bet just by, I can send my staff to say they know how I'm going to vote on a bill, and they can make that bet. So it's real conflict of interest issues too. And
certainly there's a lot of consternation among your colleagues about these places allowing betting on things that are just destructive or dangerous or detrimental to us all. We shouldn't be gaming on them or wagering on them. I'm wondering, at the halfway point of your career here in Congress, there was a legalization of sports gambling outside of Las Vegas, outside of Atlantic City. How do you read that? What do your constituents say has been the overall impact? Is that a big business now? Has it unleashed this monster, or is it a more incremental change?
No, I think it's big business now. Originally, when gaming started to spread beyond Las Vegas and then a little New Jersey, the industry was worried about it because it would be competition. But it's turned out just the opposite for two reasons. One is that the big companies from Las Vegas have done the spreading. I mean, they're running these casinos in a lot of places around the country. So it'll be an MGM in so-and-so or Boyd Gaming somewhere. So they've profited from the spread of it too. And second, when people get a little taste of gaming, they enjoy it and have fun. They want to go to the mecca of gaming, which is Las Vegas. So it's brought kind of some new folks to town. So it hasn't hurt the industry. The spread of gaming hasn't hurt. But now, when it's unregulated and it can compete not on an even playing field like this sports betting that's not called prediction markets, then that makes a difference.
One final question on this topic. You mentioned problem gambling and having services stood up for problem gamblers. That's part of the regulations that states have, that jurisdictions have when they first legalize gambling. How is that performing? I mean, do you have a sense in Nevada how well the problem gambling services are getting after the problem, or is it trying to douse a fire with a bucket of water versus a fire hose?
Well, they make a real effort. They have a public information campaign that's put out. All the states do. A certain amount of money is dedicated from the different casinos to these programs. And they work with a number of problem gaming, kind of like NGOs, organizations that are concerned about that. And it ties right into mental health. Now, there's some people who don't like gambling at all, don't want you to do it, think it's bad, think it's addictive. It's not going to satisfy them, but at least it is a commitment to try to help the most vulnerable.
And that is not a localized problem. It's a problem that exists in any community, whether it's legalized there or not. I want to shift to your role in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which has been a distinctively busy committee this year, perhaps more so than usual. Let's start off with the War Powers Authorization that went through your committee's ranking member. Do you think this war is now officially unlawful?
Well, you know, they have been very clever at saying that the time stops. The bell, you know, the tolling of the bell stops when there's a ceasefire. So that 60 days has kind of come and gone and come and gone. And so where are we in the 60 days? I think it's unlawful. I think that subverts the intention of the War Powers Act from when it was originally passed, but it doesn't seem to faze this administration.
What do you make so far of the peace process that seems to have been interrupted but had been in place for several weeks?
Well, it's very hard to come to a conclusion and make peace and declare victory when you don't know why you were there to start with. There were many reasons offered for why the president went to Iran. Was it the nuclear material? Was it the imminent threat? Was it a regime change? Was it helping Israel? Was it getting rid of the rockets? You know, what was the reason why we went? So now, how do you declare victory? I think there is no peace process. The whole MOU was so vague and so hurried and so lacking of details of even some of those things I just mentioned, that it wasn't going to work to start with. We had no real leverage over Iran. They knew apparently we weren't serious. The president always caves, and you've seen that again. Are we going to fire? Are we going to own the electric power plants? Are we going to block the straits? Are we going to negotiate with whoever? So there is no peace process, and the administration is having a hard time justifying why they're there, why they went there, why they hadn't gotten anything for it, why they've given all this money away without any conditions, and how do they get out of it?
We're speaking with Dina Titus, Congresswoman from the 1st District of Nevada. Based on what you're hearing in the Foreign Affairs Committee from your fellow Democrats, from the chairman, what do you think the impact has been on America's foreign relationships in Europe and with key allies?
Well, it's been negative, and it's been negative internally. Certainly the public opinion polls here are opposed to the war, and just look at gas prices and you can understand why, because people don't generally get involved in foreign policy much. They're more concerned about domestic policy. But internationally, it certainly has made a difference. Look at the role that the president played at the recent NATO summit. The rest of the world can no longer trust the United States because they don't don't stand by their word. They can no longer depend on the United States to defend them because they've done so poorly with these threats and the results in Iran. You know, I have a number of delegations who come and visit me from other countries, and they're very circumspect in the beginning. But by the
More
end,
so than they used to be?
No, just diplomatically, yeah. But by the end of the conversation, this is more than it used to be, you can tell that they are worried, that they are critical of this administration, and they just don't know what to do because they don't know what's coming next. There is no stability, there's no real diplomacy, it's hit or miss. Look at Eastern Europe, look at the Baltics, they're all very concerned. Once Ukraine goes, then the dominoes fall, so they're concerned about that. Recently, Turkey now, they're going to give F-35s to Turkey. Greece, Cyprus, those surrounding countries are very concerned about that. They just, and who are they dealing with? Are they dealing with two real estate agents? Are they dealing with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of War? Who is making these decisions? Doesn't seem to be Donald Trump, because everything is just kind of hit or miss.
What do you think your constituents, how do you think they're measuring up Pete Hegseth? What are they telling you they think about the Secretary of Defense?
I think they're embarrassed by him. Well, it depends on which side you're talking to. Ashamed of what he's done.
There's a political divide in your district,
Yes.
even on issues of war and defense.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And those kind of issues didn't used to be so partisan. You know, it's like in the Foreign Affairs Committee, politics stopped at the water's edge, and then we were united. But now, you know, that's not the case so much anymore.
I want to go to a speed round here of other questions in our remaining time.
Okay.
First of all, your background is distinctive. Formerly professor at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, UNLV. Why do you think this emerging generation is so cynical about college? Why do you think that they're so unconvinced it's something they need to do?
Well, over the years, there was a time when I was the most liberal person in the room, and then there was a time when I was the most conservative person in the room, and then there was a time when nobody gave a damn about politics. That is reversed. People do care about it now, but they don't see the value of a college education in the big picture terms of helping you do critical thinking, or helping you appreciate culture, or helping you understand the context in which you live. Now it's all about the dollar. Which major gets you the best job?
Is that a problem, or is that practical?
Well, it's practical, but I think it's a problem because I'd like to think they play the long game and not just get the next check. But the result of that is, you know, a lot of those jobs are being taken by AI, or they're afraid they are, but you've seen people booed off the stage at graduation because they mentioned AI. Students realize that that's going to have an impact. Students are moving back in with their parents because they can't pay the rent or buy a house. So I think they just don't see how it pays off, and they are in for immediate gratification these days.
I appreciate your answering that. You have the unique visibility of somebody who was in academia before being a public policy maker, and I wanted to go emphasize that you're wearing the school colors as you sit here today for UNLV.
I didn't notice that, but yes, I am.
You're in your 9th term now. Does this place feel different than when you started?
It's gotten worse.
Gotten worse?
Yeah, in terms of
What about
partisanship.
Okay.
Now you really have to look hard to find a person on the other side that you can work with in probably a niche issue. There's not just much congeniality.
Are you having success with that, at least finding those pinpoints?
Well, you know, I am. The Infrastructure and Transportation Committee is not so ideological, not such a partisan committee, because everybody needs roads and bridges, and so we've had some real, definitely. And so we've gotten some real successes in that legislation. But one of my favorite ones is working with Brian Mast, and you know how conservative he is. But we found something we agree on, and that's that the VA should not be testing on kittens and puppies. And so we have had some real success in stopping that process. And so there's something that we both care about that we can work on without talking about the other MAGA things.
One of the questions we have on our list for members I like to ask most is, what's the best food in your district? Which is hard because you have Las Vegas and the Strip, which has culinary delights left to right.
Yes.
What would you pick as among the best?
Well, we have culinary. That's one thing that we should mention. The culinary union has, we can serve anything to any number of people, and it's always fabulous. Las Vegas used to be prime rib and shrimp cocktail.
Yeah,
that's all we had.
That's the cliche.
Yes, and now we have all these foodie people, all these fancy chefs, and you can go along the strip, of course, and get good food, but the wine's going to cost you about 3 times as much. Our advantage is some of the sous chefs spin off and open their own restaurants, and then the wine is reasonable. But a lot of people brag about the food that's offered in the new kind of Pan-Asian area of town. That's really bustling, so I'd recommend trying that. And then downtown's become real funky and interesting too. James Trees is a great chef, and he has several restaurants down there.
When you have the culinary union like Nevada has, you really have probably an infinite number of answers to that question.
That's hard to pinpoint.
Thanks for drilling down. Dina Titus, representing Nevada's 1st District since 2009. Thank you for your time, man.
Well, thank you for having me.
535 continues on a particularly busy day in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate in a moment.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
$1.5 trillion is parked on the sidelines. Projects that would help create good-paying American jobs are stuck in years of burdensome reviews. Permitting reform would unlock over 650 major U.S. infrastructure projects, from new roads and bridges to bringing more energy online. With faster, more efficient permitting, we can unleash America's economic potential. Let's move from waiting to building. Ready, set, let's build.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Brody Mullins here with Dave Bauer, President and CEO of the American Road and Transportation Builders Association.
Yeah, we get paid by the word.
Thanks for joining us. We're talking about the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill passed the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, waiting for House floor action. Right. Let's start talking about your association. Tell us about the association and how it got started.
Sure. We began in 1902. The original name was the American Wheelmen Association, but we represent the entire U.S. transportation construction industry. That's project owners, project designers, contractors, equipment manufacturers, suppliers, basically anybody that is involved with making the roads and bridges that move America.
Great. And tell us about the bill and give us a little bit of a background in how the reauthorization process works. It's a 5-year reauthorization?
Yeah, it is. It's a 5-year bill. It authorizes almost $580 billion in highway, public transportation, and safety investments.
And the current bill expires this September 30th?
Yes, that is correct. The current law expires on September 30th, and this was part of the current current authorization measure was part of the 2021 broad-based infrastructure bill.
Okay. And this is a bill I remember in years past, sometimes it goes unauthorized for years, right? What happens when the projects are not authorized?
That's a really good question and very poignant for the point that we are in right now. While there are a lot of things that happen in surface transportation bills, what makes it a must-pass piece of legislation is that without an authorization in place, whether it's a long-term or a short-term, money can't be spent out of the Highway Trust Fund. And that means the Federal Highway Program and some of the public transportation programs cannot keep those funds flowing to the states for projects that are underway.
So I guess I might answer my next question, which is what is at stake? What happens if this bill is not authorized by September 30th?
Well, I mean, I think in my tenure, there's only been one time where that happened, and there was a brief lapse for a couple of days, and at that point, states do not get reimbursed. And also, what's really impactful is that a lot of the Federal Highway Administration and its staffing are paid through a takedown of the federal highway investment. And without that in place, during those 2-day periods, like 15, 20 years ago, there was a furlough of Federal Highway Administration employees.
Wow. And so this bill passed out of the committee in May. Tell us about that markup. That was one of these all-day markups where there's a million different amendments.
Yeah, I mean, and members of Congress have lots of ideas, and that's our process. I mean, but what's most important about that is that it was approved 62-2. I mean, this is a true bipartisan measure, and I think that that's something that should not be overlooked in any way, because not only did the House Transportation Committee move forward in a bipartisan way, we've got the same type of process that's going on in the Senate with the various committees that are involved there. And it's been said many, many times, and it remains true today. There's no such thing as a Republican road or a Democratic bridge.
And so remind us, speaking of Democratic roads and Republican bridges, remind us what's in this bill. This is railroads, this is highways, this is everything.
Yeah, the surface transportation programs are mostly the highway program and the public transportation programs. Yes, there is a rail component to it, and also it authorizes funds for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration as well as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So you've got highways, transit, highway safety, and trucking safety.
Okay, and then I know this is not exactly your department, but there was this big dust up this year on this railroad amendment that J.D. Vance was pushing. What does that tell us about how
I'm gonna stay in my lane on that one, Brody. I mean,
smart move.
Pardon the pun from a highway guy, but I mean, I'm gonna stay in my lane.
So the bill passes the committee.
Yeah.
It's now trying to go to the floor. Where do things stand on the House floor?
Okay, so as you already said, it was approved in May, and they authorized the resources, and we're currently in the process of waiting on the Ways and Means Committee to generate the resources necessary to support the investments. The largest component of what is going to pay for those investments continues to be revenue from the federal gasoline and diesel taxes. But as has been the case since 2008, Congress has had to generate additional revenue to supplement current user fee revenue to be able to support the investment levels that they have deemed necessary.
And you're telling me before the show, it's traditional that one chamber will move and take a long time, and then a second chamber will usually move a little faster?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of that's been the way things have happened, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay. I mean, I think typically when we look at past bills, one chamber has moved before the other chamber. I mean, my very first highway bill, the House moved first and the Senate followed. The 2021 infrastructure law emanated from the Senate, and then the House passed it several months later.
And then, September 30th seems in normal world, a long time from now, but in the congressional calendar, it's really not
I mean, and I think, at the risk of being Captain Obvious, there are not a lot of days left, or legislative days left before we get to September 30th. There's going to be a mad rush of activities, and I think there are a lot of reasons, why this measure has the opportunity to be part of that mad rush. I mean, there aren't many bills that pass a committee 62-2 and have a bipartisan product on the other side of Capitol Hill that has been being developed. Those type of things create, especially with the narrow margins that exist on Capitol Hill, the potential for action.
So you're saying in your entire time at the association, the bill is only, or the law is only been not authorized for a few days. So that means
there was one lapse. I mean, my sense is, and I'd have to go Google it or whatever. But I mean, it was like 2012. It was like in the around 2010. But I mean, it was just a couple of days, and it was a hiccup that was rectified very quickly.
So I guess my point is that for most bills that are out there, if you haven't passed the House and you haven't passed the Senate and you need to get done by September 30th, it's not going to happen. But in your case, you think.
Yeah, one way or another. I mean, you're either going to have a multi-year bill enacted, there's going to be an interim measure of some shorter duration, sometime. I mean, those have been as short as a matter of weeks to, there was a 1-year extension that was put in place in 2020, or we're going to have a lapse. I mean, and I don't think that there is any indication that there's going to be a lapse. I mean, and so, we are definitely looking at some kind of action between now and September 30th.
And is it too early to say what the major differences are between the House bill and the Senate bill? Because there really isn't.
We have not seen a Senate product.
Okay.
I mean, there's not been committee action, and so somebody may be able to answer that question, but it's not me.
Yeah. So, we live in an environment now where Republicans and Democrats seem to constantly be fighting with each other. But on your issues, they really come together. Can you tell us about how, or has that changed?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. Like I said, 62-2. I mean, 62-2. That is a pedigree that is really unique. And, we have the same type of process that's going on in the Senate. And I think that even though the 21 infrastructure law, it was more partisan in the House, I think that was because of a lot of things on top of the surface reauthorization. I mean, in fact, there were a great many people who voted against that bill or didn't support it that supported the projects in their state. I'm not implying anything disingenuous. I'm just saying that there were other components of that probably got in the way of the type of support that I think we have the potential for with a pure surface reauthorization like the House and the Senate are moving this year.
Got it. And how do you make the case to people outside of Washington that these big federal investments in highways and other surface transportation projects are worth the money?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is a challenge. And I think that there are a lot of ways to answer that. But one of the most important things to understand is that federal highway investment, on average, supports 52% of all state highway and bridge spending. And there are some states that rely on federal investment for 70% or more. And so that is, for many states, their entire construction program. And what we have spent a lot of time doing is focusing on the projects that are funded with federal dollars. And we do that through social media to make sure that people in that state know what they're getting in return. We also have created a portion of our website, arpahighway-dashboard.org, that provides state-specific and project-specific information on projects supported with federal dollars. That site has been visited by 3,000 people, 8,500 times since the beginning of this year.
Dave Bauer, President and CEO of the American Road and Transportation Builders Association. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, and best of luck with the 535.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm Brody Mullins. We'll be right back on 535.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the
Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
You're watching 535.
We're live from the Capitol, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Scott McFarland. Pleased to be joined by Christian Menefee, Democrat representing Houston and some of the Houston suburbs in Texas. Also a member of the House Science and Space Committee. And we're going to talk about one of the important pieces of legislation you're working on through that committee. But first of all, we should lay the groundwork. There have been alerts about potential dangers and threats to American water systems from foreign actors or others who may have malign interests against these critical U.S. utilities. What are you aiming to do to ensure the security of those systems?
We have to increase funding for the protection and the sophistication of those systems. If you look throughout the country, we have about 170,000 drinking water and wastewater systems. Now, this may sound innocuous, but every single person in this country needs water to drink, to bathe, right? To be able to flush their toilets. You could bring this country to a screeching halt if you were able to infiltrate these systems. And in 2023, the EPA went and investigated some of these systems and found that 70% of them were deficient when it came to being positioned to protect from cyber attacks. So when you have countries out there like Russia, like China, that are trying to infiltrate our systems, that are sending hackers to do the work of potentially bringing us harm, we got to get ready. And that means federal dollars in these programs that help these systems upgrade, get protected, and ensure we don't have these major attacks.
You're from an enormous city. You have an enormous water system in Houston, one that is aging, I think, terribly.
Yeah.
What needs to be done to retrofit a massive system like that and get it into the world where you feel more comfortable that it's insured and it's safe?
It's scary stuff. You know, in Harris County, we have almost 5 million people. We're one of the most populous states in the country. If we were a state, we'd be the 25th most populous state. It's a lot of people living in a very connected area. And we have a single water purification plant that services 2.2 million people. That is a single point of failure in the system. If hackers were to be able to infiltrate that system, bring it all crashing down, we'd be in deep trouble. On top of that, we have the largest medical hub in the entire country in the Texas Medical Center, home to MD Anderson, which studies and treats so many cancers throughout this country. So we have to be able to upgrade our infrastructure. That means federal dollars to make these systems more sophisticated so that there's no one single point of failure in the system, and adjusting to the time. With the proliferation of AI, of enhanced technologies, we're now saying that things that may have taken weeks or months to hack could take days or weeks. And this is not hypothetical. It happened in Texas in January. 3 different cities were targeted. And in one city, Russian hackers were able to make a tank overflow because they got in the system and they messed with it. So we have to invest in upgrading our systems. We have to invest in upgrading our infrastructure. And that is a role of the federal government, because this is not just a local issue. This is a national security issue.
Let's pull the curtain back as to what you specifically see coming out of the legislation. You need funding to better ensure the security of the systems. Would you authorize specific things they need to do with that money, specific granular concepts to secure the systems?
Absolutely. I mean, there are systems right now, new technologies that have been built that where you can put a software on a piece of a water infrastructure system, and it can let you know the moment that there's been some sort of change in that system. There's also systems that are air-gapped, meaning that they're not directly connected to any type of internet system, so that it all happens locally, so that somebody sitting in front of a computer in Russia doesn't have the ability to virtually go in and destroy these systems. So there's a number of things that we'll have all the smart people take a look at as to what we want the EPA and the Department of Energy to specifically do. But the most important thing is if the money's not there, you can't do anything. And so I'm so grateful that the Science, Space, and Technology Committee is coming together in a bipartisan way to address this issue, which is so important to us. You know, in Houston, we had Winter Storm Uri hit us in 2021, and we saw some of our water systems were offline during that period. We had people across the state who died during a freeze, which is not something you would expect to hear in the state of Texas. So I'm committed to working with anybody. I don't care if your party is red, blue, purple, doesn't matter to me. We should be working together to protect against this national security threat.
Before I shift to other topics, on the issue of water resources, water security, water resources and development, what you all call WRDA up here, am I sensing a unique bunch of bipartisan coalitions on those issues? Because it feels like one of those issues where I'm not getting that political toxicity that cleaves people apart.
That's right. I mean, look, I've been able to work with folks on the committee and even preparing for hearings and thinking through concepts. And although I've only been in Congress, I'd say about 150, 160 days, this is one of the issues where I'm saying that there is direct alignment. When these water purification facilities, these wastewater facilities, when they're being attacked, the hackers don't care if it's a Democratic district or a Republican district. So I'm sensing that this is one of the few areas where I'm going to quickly be able to work with other members, and I'm not going to ask myself when I go into working with them, what party are you a member of?
Fair enough. On the issue of absenteeism in schools, you are proposing things to help school systems better get after trying to get kids in the building and educated. Tell us some of what you're proposing.
Yeah, I have introduced a bill that allows federal dollars to be spent locally in schools to ensure that we're addressing the root causes of absenteeism. Look, you can say what you want about a kid, but if the kid is not in the school system, if they're not actually coming to class, you're not going to be able to get them the help that they need. Too often, we go immediately to punitive measures, to trying to harm the kid, harm their parents for them not being in school, but we should look at the root causes. What's going on in the home? Is there counseling services we can get them connected with? And ensuring that federal funding can be used for that. So I'm really excited about the bill. I'm hopeful that we'll get some support from across the aisle. but education was the great equalizer in my life. I'm the first in my family to graduate college. I went to college on a Pell Grant. I have more members in family who have been to prison than who have been to college, and that education was able to get me in a position, and now I'm being interviewed as a member of the House of Representatives. So I want every single kid to have that ladder to be able to pull themselves to a better situation.
Let me press you on that, because you are among the younger members of Congress. You may have unique visibility. If kids today still have aspirations for college the way we did, it feels like the youth, teenagers, may be more disaffected by the concept of college than they used to be. And I know that because we hear that from university heads.
Yeah.
How do you measure that among your constituents in Houston?
I just saw online that someone was trying to explain the very popular show Love Island, and they said, hey, you have to think about, a lot of these kids went to high school during the pandemic. Folks are growing up on social media now. They're seeing other opportunities to acquire wealth, and at the same time, the great promise that we made to a generation, my generation, is failing them. We told them, you go off, you get the good education, and everything's going to work out well for you. Well, then technological changes happen. Now AI, and we're about to see an entire level of white-collar jobs be eliminated, because now instead of hiring 6 people, you can hire 1 person who can do the job of 6 people. So that's why I'm working hard to ensure that we invest more in apprenticeship programs and bringing back skilled labor, the types of jobs where you can work 20 years in and be able to go off and do better for your family. So I think we need a cohesive approach that addresses skilled workforce training, but also college is too dang expensive right now. You know, people are going to school and it's $50,000 a year. I left law school with $200,000 in debt. I can assure you, I did not have $200,000 worth of education. So we need to address the affordability of our higher education institutions.
Let's go further on the issue of affordability. How do you measure how this Congress is tackling the issue, how this administration is tackling the issue?
Horribly. I mean, you have a president who has said himself that we can't afford to pay for people's child care because we got a war going on that he put us in, that nobody else has asked for, and that's the reason we can't afford it. You had a member of Congress from the Texas delegation just yesterday say on the steps of the Capitol that the way he's going to address affordability is to have a nice lobster in anticipation of the 250th anniversary of our country. I think the problem is here in the Beltway, and I say this as a newcomer, you got far too many people who are getting Beltway brain. They're more focused on their own personal wealth with the president and his billion-dollar crypto scam. They're more focused on their own prestige, their own celebrity, instead of the issues that are impacting Americans. People are going to the grocery store and it's more expensive. They're going to the gas station, it's more expensive. So I'm hopeful that my party takes back the majority in November and we can get to the legislating of the issues that people care about.
What could that be? What could be legislated on affordability? It's a pernicious problem, not one that you can solve with any silver bullet piece of paper, but what would you advocate your colleagues get after?
Yeah, so one thing is increasing the minimum wage. Look, I worked at a local grocery store when I was in high school and graduated high school in 2006. I remember getting my promotion where they said, you are now earning $7.25 an hour. That was 20 years ago. That is still the minimum wage in this country. Nobody can take care of a family without an amount of money. We have to address housing supply in this country, which is incredibly low, and it's making it so that folks can't find an affordable place to live. There is federal investment that can go in all these areas to really help people, and of course addressing the healthcare issues. But a lot of these issues have been exacerbated by this president, by this administration, so that he can move money around for his weaponization fund, for his war in Iran, instead of the kitchen table issues that people care about. But the last and one of the more important ones to me is addressing money in politics. Look, part of the reason why you've seen a Congress go so wayward to where they're focused more on tax cuts for billionaires than they are on working class issues is because they're concerned that in their next race, billionaires will put billions of dollars into races and candidates who are running against them. So we need a political system where people elect their politicians, not politicians drawing maps that are beneficial to them and kowtowing to billionaires who are going to fill their campaign war chests.
Explain to the 535 what your new district went to and what it is now. You are part of a redrawn Texas now.
Yeah.
What would it be and what's shifted for you?
Right now, I represent a district that starts pretty much at downtown Houston and goes way up north to Bush Intercontinental Airport. My new district flips on the axis of downtown Houston to where now most of my district is south of downtown. I have 75% change. So I only
What's that like when you get redrawn and you have to learn a new part of America?
Well, I'll do you one better. I had to learn this new district in 3 weeks because that's when my next race was. There are a bunch of similarities between the two districts, but in many ways the neighborhoods are completely different. But the saddest part of this whole thing is that these districts were redrawn at the direct request of President Trump, and our governor Greg Abbott in Texas did exactly what he asked for. But I've seen real courage coming from Republicans in states like Indiana who have told the president, I'm not going to screw over my residents just to further your political agenda. So I'm hopeful that we'll see more governors across this country who are willing to stand up to the president. But this was about one man knowing that his so-called one big beautiful bill was not going to win the hearts and minds of constituents, and instead pencil whipping the map so he could get more seats.
We talk about your district. We have a series of 1-minute questions for you, Congressman, about your district.
I rise with the intention of disrupting the normal business.
Ask unanimous consent. I ask unanimous consent.
The senator from Nebraska is recognized.
The gentlelady is recognized.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
New district or old? What's the best food in your district?
Oh man, I am a barbecue guy, so I'm gonna have to go Triple J's barbecue or Ray's barbecue. And a honorable mention, Frenchie's chicken, because their peach cobbler is fire.
I like that we went honorable mention in that. I like that you didn't leave out the dessert part of the meal. That's
I'm
nice.
a Texan. I mean, we are eating in our state.
Let me tell you something, Mr. Menefee. We've interviewed a number of Texans. The consistency of the barbecue answer really is striking, but not a surprise. What is the one thing here that you would change in Congress of how it functions, the administration of Congress? What would you fix?
I would limit the impact of social media. I think there used to be a time where you could work across the aisle, you could take a picture at a bill signing that helped millions of people across the country, you could put it on your wall and be proud of that picture with that member of Congress from the other side. Now, if you do that, you're going to get assassinated on Twitter. It makes people focus more on running to the most extreme fringe parts of whatever ideology, instead of trying to find areas where we can work together. Look, I have been a thorn in the side of Republicans in the state of Texas for a long time, and I continue to be a fighter, but I want to find more opportunities to work together because my job here is to get stuff done for people.
Lastly, you're new to this world. You're getting your sea legs pretty fast, but what surprises you about this, or what's the one thing you didn't expect you find challenging in this job?
My father did 28 years and 11 months in the Coast Guard, so I'm going to personally tell him that you said I got my sea legs, because my sea legs are horrible. You know, one thing I love about this place already is just the ability to immediately have an impact. When you speak, people care what you have to say. When you speak, you can shift policy, and being in that very humbling position to be able to move the needle to help people, I very much love. One thing I am not fond of, it's a whole lot of walking. You know, in Texas, in Houston, we don't walk. We get in cars and we drive places. Here, if you got votes, you might have 3 vote series in one day. You're back and forth to the office. It's a lot of that. That and then just the polarization that we've seen. You know, look, people on the outside of this building are upset. And they're upset because they feel like their politicians have been captured by interests that are not their constituents. And that's a real lack of trust that the American public have with the folks who serve in this building. So my goal is to try to address that and be as authentic and genuine as I can. But I am loving the opportunity to be able to make some real difference.
If you measure the steps, you get above 20,000, you know it's either been a very good day or a very bad day, but that's the type of world that we're in here. And it's a culture shock for a while, but that's why you wear nice, comfortable shoes, Mr. Menefee.
A Texan who is sweating out his shirt in Washington, D.C. is so embarrassing to the humidity of Houston, but I'm making my way.
It's part of the joy. Christian Menefee represents Texas. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me.
535 continues in just a moment. We're glad you joined us.
You're watching 535, and we'll be right back.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
Here on Capitol Hill, the 535 are in charge, the members of Congress. But in a democracy, in the people's house, you need to be heard as well. So if you have questions or comments or ideas, submit them to us at 535.news, because here with us, the floor is yours.
Tell me when. Go. Hi, welcome back to 535. I'm Paul Kane of Notice, and joined today by Gabe Fleischer, author of Wake Up to Politics. It's a must-read newsletter. And usually on Fridays we have this feature on Gabe's newsletter of what did Congress actually accomplish this week. I know it's Wednesday, but at least both chambers were in session on Monday, so we're a little bit more than halfway through the week. We've already got some accomplishments, so let's get to it. What are some of the things that we have seen so far? Let's break them down.
Yeah, so I think the biggest ticket, or at least kind of the most attention-grabbing item that happened this week is the House passed what's called the Sunshine Protection Act. It's a bill, if people are really annoyed with having to change their clocks twice a year, this would put an end to it because it would put us on permanent daylight savings time. So no clock switching, permanent daylight savings time, and that passed with pretty lopsidedly, almost all Republicans, and then Democrats were about split, but a little bit more Democrats supported than opposed. So with a huge bipartisan majority.
Okay, let's break this one down
Yes.
first. It's a favorite of mine. So yeah, the vote was 308 to 117, and forgive me, I didn't watch the debate, and I haven't read into the arguments back and forth. This bill would be, we are currently in daylight savings time right now. And if this were to immediately become the law of the land, we would not do the fall back thing. Now, what were the proponents of this having you don't have longer days. We don't have longer days with sunshine. There is the same amount of sunshine. We just move the sunshine from, sunrise later in the morning, sunset later in the evening. But what are the opponents of this saying? What is the pushback against it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's one that doesn't really break down on partisan lines. One of the things is it does kind of break down on geographic lines because, again, like you said, Congress cannot control how much sun there is and cannot control where. It's dispersed around the country, and a lot of the big proponents of it are in the South and in Florida, where there would still be a relatively early sunrise, or relatively, it wouldn't affect the morning as much down in Florida, but there's other parts of the country, particularly up north, where it would, really affect kind of the morning hours. So that's kind of one of the big criticisms. Another thing to point out is we did this before. We tried this in the 1970s. Congress went a few-year period where we did permanent daylight savings time, and a lot of the opponents point out it wasn't too popular, and that's why we switched back a few years later for the exact reasons that you're talking about. That while people may have appreciated the later sunlight, in the morning, the darkness in the morning did not end up being so popular, and that's what a lot of people have pointed out.
Was it Trump has endorsed this,
yes,
right?
That's right?
And is that the reason why the Republicans now seem so overwhelmingly supportive?
I think that's part of it.
Were there any Republicans who voted against
There
this?
was some, yes. There was, I think, about 20. About
Okay.
20 Republicans who voted against it. I think, it is really, I think, Marco Rubio was the big sponsor when he was in the Senate.
Yeah.
And people might remember kind of snuck it through by unanimous consent. Tom Cotton kind of was not told and would have objected.
Yeah.
So I think, the Florida delegation obviously has a lot of power right now between Trump and Rubio. I believe also, obviously Anna Paulina Luna, she's also a supporter. Obviously Mike Johnson's been trying to kind of coax her in line in terms of the SAVE Act. So I think this is partially a way to kind of get her and some of the other kind of right-wing Republicans who do support this, in line with the rule, and other things, kind of a handout to them, kind of a carrot to them. So I think those are some of the dynamics of why we saw some action.
Okay. And now the Senate, as you alluded to, just sort of miraculously let this pass through their unanimous consent a few years ago. Democrats were in the majority. It was one of those quirky things where they call it hotlining a bill. They ask all 100 offices whether or not they oppose it. And I don't think anybody really expected it to go to clear. And then all of a sudden it became law. And I remember...
Or passed the Senate.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, passed the Senate. And then the House looked up and was like, Steny Hoyer was majority leader at the time. It's like, what? Wait, what happened? So this is not something that has, an easy passage in the Senate, right? You've got Cotton already out there saying, now, why does he oppose it so much? What is his position?
I'm not sure his particular opposition. I know I've heard him and others kind of raise that kind of idea of that it was done before in the 70s, and I do think kind of the geographic differences I was alluding to of while it might be kind of nice in Florida, you get a little bit more north. and it's not nice. I don't know why he's particularly so passionate about it, and it seems like his staff didn't even know, because apparently what happened in 2022 is, it went through the hotline like you said, and the staff were like, oh no, our boss has no issue with it, and they were very, very wrong. So if it comes up again in the Senate, he will.
Yeah, I was looking back at Tommy Tuberville's statements and speeches about this, because Tuberville is one of those who is just always talking about more sunshine. And last year his statement said that this would allow Americans to, quote, get enough sleep and more sunlight. To be clear, let's restate this. You would just be having the sun rise later. So, if Donald Trump likes to play golf, apparently late morning, early afternoon, this will have no effect on him. But for those people that like to get up and walk their dogs at 6:30,
kids going on a school bus.
I was walking Bruce and Lily this morning at about 10 after 6. There was some sunlight. If you have this permanently, especially in the winter, even here in Washington, D.C., you would have sunrise at some points at like 8:30. Right. Go further north, up into Maine, and it would be like after 9 o'clock. You'd basically be like Northern Europe. So yeah, kids waiting for school bus in the dark. This is not an easy call.
Yep.
All right. So what else has happened this week in Washington?
Yes.
What else have they gotten done that we don't focus on nearly as much?
So another interesting bill that passed the House unanimously this week. So as people may know, it is illegal for foreign nationals to contribute to candidates, to campaign committees in politics. So there's almost no way for if you're a foreign citizen, for you to kind of pour money into American politics. The exception being, as we know, a lot of states and cities have ballot measures every year. There's always, California, always has like a huge long list of them, but other states do too. And a few years ago, there was one in Montana where there was an energy company, a Canadian energy company, that was trying to pour money into an energy ballot measure in Montana. And it went up to the FEC that basically said, we're looking at the campaign finance law, and there really is nothing against foreign nationals donating to ballot measure campaigns. The law says you can't to candidate committees, but they said to ballot measures, there's really nothing against this. And so that is kind of like a loophole. And we know, ballot measures can be about abortion, legal marijuana, minimum wage. I mean, these can have huge impacts. And so it is kind of one little loophole that foreign nationals are able to sneak through. And so that was a bill that passed the House this week that closed that loophole and banned foreign nationals from donating also to ballot measures.
So it would be a federal ban, but on state and local elections?
Exactly, yes.
Huh, okay. That's not exactly something that is a small c conservative approach.
True, yes, not exactly federalist,
30 years ago, the 1996 elections, the Democratic National Committee got into a lot of trouble because they were accepting donations, and there was a whole bunch of questions regarding whether or not there were foreign nationals that were sliding money into the DNC. And the Senate, it was not the Homeland Security Committee at that point, because the Homeland Security Committee didn't exist. It was Governmental Reform, chaired by Fred Thompson. They did a big investigation into this, and it was a big deal, and they clarified the rules a lot more. Okay, what else do we got?
So there's interesting, there was like several bills on kind of airport security that also passed through the House this week. There was two, one that passed unanimously, basically, a few about kind of TSA, kind of like waiting lines at TSA. One that would kind of, these two bills that would create pilot programs, one for members of the military, and that passed unanimously. Members of the military and their family would kind of be able to go expedited through TSA. And then another bill, slightly more controversial in that it got, I believe, like about 20 or so nay votes, that were about a dozen or so nay votes that would give lines for basically families with kids 12 and under. And you saw some kind of Freedom Caucus Republicans, as well as Jim Himes and Jake Auchincloss. I don't know why, I could not find any statements from them, but two Democrats who opposed that as well. That would be kind of expedited screening for both military members, and then the one that had a little bit more opposition was for families.
Does this bill increase the number of TSA workers that would be handling this? Because if you're expediting for one set of travelers, and you don't have more TSA, that means you and me are probably standing in line a bit longer.
Exactly, I don't believe so, and it should be noted they're both only pilot programs, so it would be certain numbers of airports across the country, so it would immediately be enacted, and I do not believe they include any more funding into the TSA, but that does bring us to another airport security bill that passed this week in the House. And basically, when you buy an airplane ticket, every time you pay $6.50 to a security fee, that it's there itemized when you buy your ticket, and it's listed as this kind of 9/11 passenger security fee, that if you read that, you're like, oh, that's going to TSA and to fund airport security. But actually, it doesn't, at least not completely. And actually, huge chunks of that have gotten diverted to other purposes over the years. And so that's another bill that passed the House this week to maybe, I don't know if they did it together on purpose to kind of address what you're talking about, but it would actually make sure that all the money that, when we each pay $6.50 every airplane ticket, and that it says it's earmarked for airport security, it would go, all of it, to airport security. And so that would give a little bit more funding to kind of TSA and to security.
Sounds like the Social Security Trust Fund. Okay, final thing, I want you to talk a little bit about, you attended a Supreme Court hearing. Not at the Supreme Court.
Yes, true.
Here at the United States Senate, the justices. Tell us about that, and what are they hoping to get?
Yeah, so it's relatively rare. It didn't used to be. I mean, as everyone here knows, all sorts of cabinet secretaries, everyone has to go to the Appropriations Committee and kind of, pass around a hat and ask for money every year, and the Supreme Court justices used to do that too. This is the first time, though, since 2019 that any justices have appeared before an Appropriations Committee, and the first time since 2011 that they came to the Senate. They were, Amy Coney Barrett and Elena Kagan were before both the House and Senate yesterday. And yeah, they are asking, and the reason why the lawmakers are finally like, you really do need to, guys, you need to come in person, because they're asking for a lot more money. And basically, since the last time they had come, the security budget's basically doubled. And it's, as we know, there's been a lot more threats, just like here in this building. The Capitol Police obviously has been tracking a huge uptick in threats to members of Congress. It's the same with federal judges, a huge uptick of threats to Supreme Court justices, and they're asking for a lot more funding, basically to kind of, just in the last few years, they now have around-the-clock security at all the justices' homes. And they're trying to increase those details, trying to move it over from the Marshal Service to the Supreme Court Police, which is why there was kind of an emergency supplemental to kind of further that goal in the January funding bill that passed to end the shutdown in January. And now they're asking for even more to kind of, saying, that there's kind of a lot of threats in their lives, and they're asking for more security.
Amenable or not amenable were most Congress?
Yeah, I mean, there was really no objections at all. And, even most of the members from both sides of the aisle who would ask, they still went through the motions. They would ask, why do you need this, and why is this? And there was a little bit of upset because it seems like the January request, it seems like kind of came really last minute and without much explanation. But it was kind of funny. Every member who asked about that, they really, all of them were prefaced it by like, we know you need this, like we're not upset, we're going to give it to you, but just explain us a little why. So it really did seem like something that had bipartisan buy-in.
Members of Congress themselves want more money and more security. All right, everyone. That's all we have for today. Coming up tomorrow on 5:35, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Adam Smith, Lloyd Smucker on getting our arms around the debt and deficit, and Politico's Josh Gernstein on the topic we know he knows best, Supreme Court. He broke the incredible story 4 years ago about the Dobbs hearing. It'd be great to hear from him. All right, everybody. On behalf of all of us here, thank you for watching. If it's important to the 535, it's important to all of us. See you tomorrow.